My son kicked me out for his wife's family. The same day my husband announced our divorce as a result. The front porch light flickers overhead, but not from a bulb going out. It's motion activated like I'm a stranger. I stand there, suitcase in one hand, a glass casserole dish in the other. The night air slices through my coat, and I feel something's changed. Not just in the weather, but in my place in the world. My name is Lillian Carter, and I'm 62 years old. I live or lived in northern Indiana, in the same house for 37 years. Except tonight, that door won't open. I press the doorbell, already knowing the sound it makes. I used to hear it from the kitchen while frosting cakes or folding laundry. But this time, the silence that follows is too long. Finally, the door cracks open. My son Jeremy peeks out. His face is half lit by the hallway light. "Hey," he says, stepping outside. Behind him, I hear voices, laughter, warm voices. But not mine, not anymore. "I thought you said the guest room was ready," I manage. He rubs the back of his neck. "Yeah, Morgan's parents came in early. I didn't know until this afternoon. It got kind of crowded. I figured you'd be okay, in the garage just for tonight." The garage. I glance behind him again. I can see their coats, Morgan's parents' plush and expensive, hanging on my hooks. A casserole steams in my hands untouched. "You want to come in for a bit? Just to drop your stuff," he adds. "Drop your stuff." I step into the foyer, and immediately, I know I don't belong here. The pictures on the wall have changed. My framed needlework is gone. The house smells like Morgan's perfume, not the cinnamon candles I used to light every fall. I walk toward the hallway, but Jeremy stops me. They're already settled in. "Mom, seriously, it's just a night. Tomorrow we'll figure something out, okay?" "Where's your father?" I ask. He said he'll meet you later. He had something come up." I nod, but the shame floods faster than I expected. I hand him the casserole. He doesn't even look at it. The garage is cold, barely lit, by a single bulb that takes its time humming to life. My old things are shoved to the corner's cardboard boxes labeled "Christmas books, Mom's keepsakes." It smells like paint and forgotten memories. He brings in a blanket and a pillow, says goodnight, closes the door. And that's when I hear the click, the lock. It echoes louder than anything else that day. I sit on a fold-out chair and try not to cry. But the tears come anyway, hot and bitter, sliding into the collar of my coat. There's a strange sound in my throat, somewhere between a sob and a laugh. Was this really happening? Just this morning, I'd made pumpkin bread for Morgan. Just this morning, I was wife-mother host. I had packed my suitcase like I was going on a trip, not into exile. Jeremy said this would just be for a few days, till things settled. But things had already settled. I was the only one who didn't know it. I take my phone out of my purse to text Alan, my husband. No response. I try again. "Where are you?" 3 dots flash, then disappear. Nothing. I'm tired. My back aches from the drive. My hands are stiff with the cold. I ball up the blanket and curl into myself like something abandoned on the roadside. I want to scream, but I don't want them to hear me. I want to bang on the door, but I don't want them to feel guilty. I want someone to choose me for once. Just choose me. Instead, I sit there in silence. Do they even know I'm out here? Do they care? If you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you knock again? Would you leave? Or would you stay? Just to see how far they'll go. Because right now, I don't know which hurts more, the cold outside or the cold inside that house. I didn't fall asleep that night, not really. Between the creaks of the garage settling and the occasional rustle of mice in the corners, my thoughts kept unraveling. I watched my breath cloud in the air and tried to count how many times that garage bulb buzzed, flickered, and settled again into its pale yellow glow. I used to ask my son to replace it for me when it started doing that. Now I wondered if anyone even noticed it anymore. By dawn, my joints ached, and my pride felt bruised in places I didn't know existed. How did I become the outsider? 37 years. I built my life inside that house, one laundry load, one lasagna, one scraped knee kiss at a time. I used to carry Jeremy on my hip while stirring pasta sauce. He once gave me a clay handprint that said "Best Mom Ever." I kept it on the windowsill above the sink for decades. Now I was nothing but a guest, a tolerated visitor, and not even that if we're being honest. I stepped outside around 6 a.m., blinking into the frosted silence of the Indiana morning. There was still snow in the yard, untouched, beautiful. I'd always loved the way the sun lit the icicles along the gutters, like the house was wearing a string of diamonds, but even the beauty stung now. I opened the trunk of my car and sat there for a while, watching my breath curl upward. That's when Morgan came out. No coat, just a robe, and her phone in hand. She didn't look at me, just lit a cigarette, took one slow drag, and turned back toward the door. She didn't say good morning. She didn't ask if I slept well. She didn't even flinch when she saw me. I had tried with her. God knows I tried. Every holiday, every birthday, I never corrected her parenting style. I never raised my voice. I stayed in my lane, but it was never enough. I think from the moment she married Jeremy, she decided that I was competition, not family. And slowly she chipped away at everything that tethered me to my son. First it was the holidays. We'll be spending Christmas with her family this year. Then it was the visits. We're really busy right now. Maybe next month. Then the phone calls got shorter, the texts fewer. And when I did visit, Morgan's smile was always just a little too tight, a little too fake. But I told myself this was normal. That's what happens when your children grow up and start families of their own. You take a step back. You let them build their life. I just didn't realize the door would close behind me. The garage door creaked open again. This time it was Jeremy. His hair was messy, his sweatshirt wrinkled. My son. The boy who once begged me to stay up late to read Charlotte's Web just one more time. The boy who cried in my lap the day we had to put his childhood dog down. The boy who used to bring me daisies from the neighbor's yard and say they were magic flowers. That boy was gone. I meant to come down earlier, he said, avoiding my eyes. I didn't sleep much anyway, I replied. He shifted. Mom, listen. I know this isn't ideal, but you being here, it's a lot right now. There it was. It's just for a few days, Jeremy, I said. I can be quiet. I'll stay out of the way. He didn't answer, just rubbed his temple. And then it hit me, he didn't want me there. Not just Morgan. Him, my son. The child I'd carried for 9 months and raised for over 20 years. The one I taught how to tie his shoes and make grilled cheese sandwiches. The one I stayed up with when he had fevers, and who I cried for when he left for college. He looked at me like I was a problem to solve. I just need some time, he said softly. Morgan's parents are helping with the baby. You know how she gets when things don't go smoothly. Of course, Morgan. I'm your mother, I whispered. I know. He said it like it hurt him, like it was an inconvenience. That's the moment I stopped arguing. I nodded like a good guest, like a woman who finally understood her place. I spent the rest of the morning sitting in my car with the heater running and a styrofoam cup of gas station coffee burning my hands. I looked through old photos on my phone, me and Jeremy at his high school graduation, me and Alan at our 30th anniversary dinner, Jeremy holding our family dog in the backyard. A life that felt like someone else's now. I asked myself a question I wasn't ready to answer. If your own child could look at you and see burden instead of blessing, what does that say about everything you gave? If you were in my shoes, would you blame Morgan? Would you scream at Jeremy? Would you still hold hope? Or would you finally accept what they've been trying to show you all along? That maybe, just maybe, there's no room left for you anymore. I didn't think the day could get worse, but it did. That evening, I was invited, more like instructed, to come inside for dinner. Jeremy said it with the kind of guilt I used to hear when he forgot my birthday as a teenager. But now it wasn't just forgetfulness, it was displacement, disrespect, distance. Still, I went in. I held my chin up, fixed my sweater, and told myself to be graceful. The dining room looked different. Morgan had redecorated. Gone were the burgundy curtains I helped pick out years ago, the ones that matched the autumn leaves in the backyard, replaced with soft beige panels and a farmhouse table centerpiece that looked like it belonged in a catalog, not a home. Her parents sat at the head and side of the table. Her mother, Diane, smiled at me like a flight attendant, polite but empty. Her father, Charles, didn't even lift his eyes from his plate. Jeremy sat across from me, Morgan next to him. Alan, my husband, sat to my right. We passed roles, we discussed weather. We danced around the tension like it didn't hang in every breath. Then came the moment. Alan set down his fork, cleared his throat, and said it like he was reciting an item from the grocery list. I filed the papers. I blinked. What papers? He looked at me for the first time that evening. The divorce. It's time. I felt the room tilt. It wasn't dramatic. There was no argument, no warning, no build-up. Just cold words in a warm room. And no one else flinched. Not Jeremy, not Morgan, not even Diane with her perfect pearls and her quiet smirk. You filed without telling me, I asked, my voice low strangled. Alan nodded. We've been done for a while, Lillian. I didn't want to keep pretending. But I wasn't pretending, I whispered. I was trying. He didn't respond. I looked at Jeremy, my son, my only child. His eyes darted to his plate, then to Morgan. He didn't say a word, not even a breath of defense, just silence. I had cooked for this man, Alan, for nearly 4 decades. I'd held his secrets, smoothed his shirts, buried my own wants beneath his dreams. I never once thought he'd be the one to blindside me, but he did, so calmly, so cleanly. I wanted to tell you before he added, but with everything going on, with what going on, I said, that I'm being pushed out, that you all moved on while I was still in the room. The silence cracked a little then. Morgan's fork clinked against her plate. Diane sipped her wine with practiced detachment. No one said a word, and I realized something chilling. They weren't shocked because they already knew. They'd all known. Jeremy knew, Morgan knew, her parents knew, maybe even the dog knew. But I hadn't. I was the last to find out, like the old woman in the fairy tale who doesn't realize she's been erased from the story until the very end. Alan folded his napkin. This doesn't have to be messy. We can do it civilly. I'm willing to give you the cottage in Unionville and... I don't want the cottage, I snapped, standing. I want to know when I stopped being your wife, when I stopped being his mother. The room went stiff. Morgan's eyes narrowed, but she didn't speak. Alan stared at me like I'd become a problem, like an unexpected charge on a credit card. Something he didn't want, didn't expect, and didn't feel like dealing with. I'm sorry it came out like this, he said, as if it were the delivery that hurt more than the betrayal. I turned to Jeremy. Say something. He opened his mouth, closed it again, and said, I think it's best we all just calm down. Calm down. Those words landed harder than the divorce announcement. I walked out. No one followed, not my husband, not my son, not even to pretend. I went back to the garage, heart pounding in my chest like a drum. I slammed the car door shut and screamed. Not a cry, not a sob. A scream that scratched its way out of my throat like something wild and broken. The kind of scream that doesn't ask for understanding, it just demands to exist. I punched the steering wheel until my hands ached, and then I curled up small and defeated in the front seat. Outside, I could hear laughter from the dining room, silverware scraping plates, ice clinking in glasses. They were still eating, still toasting, still moving on. If you were me, what would you do next? Would you beg your husband to reconsider? Would you demand your son take your side? Would you fight for a seat at a table that already had your name scraped off? Or would you finally just walk away? The next morning, the house was louder than usual. Laughter spilled from the kitchen, Morgan's laugh high and syrupy, her mother's voice floating behind it. I could hear clinking mugs and the familiar sound of someone opening the orange juice carton too aggressively. That used to be Jeremy. It still was. Only now I was on the other side of the wall. I hadn't changed clothes, hadn't brushed my teeth. I sat up in the car seat, adjusted my scarf, and stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. Puffy eyes, lips dry from the heater air, hair pressed flat from where I'd leaned into the seat. I didn't look like someone who once ran a home. I looked like someone clinging to the idea of one. Eventually, Jeremy came out. He didn't knock, just opened the garage and peeked in as if checking on an old appliance he didn't quite know how to fix. "Hey, Mom," he said too casual. "You okay?" I nodded because that's what mothers do even when they're not okay. "Listen, Morgan's folks are gonna be here through the weekend. It's a little tighter than we thought. So, we're gonna need the guest room." I thought the guest room was for me, I said flatly. He sighed. It was, but then Dad left. And then Morgan's mom needed her back adjusted. The bed in there's better for her back. I didn't know it'd go down like this, okay? "And what about me, Jeremy?" He paused. "We were thinking maybe you could stay at the hotel off Route 12 for a few nights. Just until things ease up." The words landed like stones. Ease up. He rubbed his hands together. Morgan's just under stress with the pregnancy. Her mom helps keep her calm. And you being here, it's a lot. It's not you. It's just everything. "No," I said. "It is me." Because everything he said, the hotel, the excuses, the soft guilt in his voice, only confirmed one thing. I was the problem they didn't want to solve. I was a suitcase they kept moving out of the way. Still, I nodded again. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just asked him, "Can I use the bathroom before I go?" He looked relieved. "Of course, come on in." Inside the house was warm. The fireplace was lit. The baby's sonogram was framed on the mantel. Morgan's mother was curled up on the couch with a mug that said, "World's Best Grandma." My mug, the one I used for Coco every Christmas Eve. No one looked up when I passed. In the hallway, I stopped outside the guest room. I saw my overnight bag sitting outside the door, zipped up and forgotten. The door itself was open, just a crack. Inside, Morgan's father was lying on the bed snoring. I stared at the scene for a long moment. That was supposed to be my space, my room, my bed. It had been promised, just like everything else in this family. Instead, I took my bag and carried it down the steps, one creaking stair at a time, like I was descending deeper into something I couldn't quite name. Humiliation, loss, or just truth. Jeremy helped load my suitcase into the car. He didn't look me in the eye. "We'll check in on you soon," he said. I stared at him, really stared. His face still had that boyish softness, but it had hardened in places too, places I hadn't noticed, or maybe just didn't want to see. "You're really okay with this?" I asked him. He hesitated. "It's just temporary, Mom. You'll see." "I hope your son never does this to you," I said, and got in the car. I didn't drive to the hotel. I didn't even know where I was going. I just drove, past the gas station where Jeremy and I used to get Slurpees, past the school where I used to wait in the carpool lane, watching for his backpack bouncing through the crowd, past the corner cafe where Alan used to surprise me with flowers on our anniversary. I kept driving until my hands stopped shaking, and as I drove, I thought about how promises used to mean something, how people used to keep their word, how mothers were once the first place you went, not the last place you pushed away. Now I was an inconvenience, an extra chair in a room with perfect symmetry. If you were in my shoes, would you have gone quietly? Would you have forced your way back in? Or would you have looked at the people you raised, the man you married, the home you built, and realized it was no longer yours, that it hadn't been for a long time? I didn't make it to the hotel, couldn't bring myself to check in and give them my name like it was just another night, like I was some passing traveler with nowhere to go and nothing to grieve. Instead, I drove aimlessly through town, past places that used to know me, the library, the craft store, the church where I helped decorate the altar every December. I pulled into the parking lot behind the strip mall and watched the daylight fade into orange, then ash. At some point, I realized I had nowhere left to go. That night, I went back to the only place that still had some of my things. Some sliver of me, the garage. The overhead light buzzed as I unlocked the side door. I didn't tell Jeremy I was back. I didn't care if anyone knew. If they noticed me gone, they didn't say anything. If they heard the door creak open or the car pull in, no one came out to greet me. I curled up on the thin fold-out cot they had left behind. No pillow this time. Just a throw blanket that smelled like mothballs and winter dust. The cement floor sucked the warmth from my body within minutes. I curled tighter, my hip bone pressed hard against the mattress bar. A storm moved in. The wind howled against the garage door, and I found myself whispering prayers to no one in particular. I thought of my wedding day. Alan had worn that gray suit he hated just to please me. He said vows that made my knees weak, promises of forever, of love that grows, not fades. I believed him. I thought of Jeremy's birth, how I sobbed when I first held him, how I swore I would give him everything I never had. A stable home, protection, love that didn't come with a price tag. I kept that promise, but what did I get in return? A locked door, a cold floor, a forgotten name. Around midnight, I heard footsteps above me. Laughter, dishes clinking in the sink. Morgan's high voice shouting something playful. Someone turned on music. My son's voice mixed in low and warm and happy. I wasn't part of it. I wasn't even near it. They were living. I was surviving. I remembered a moment from years ago when Jeremy was 10 and scraped his knee outside. He burst into the kitchen, crying dirt smeared on his cheeks. I scooped him up before he could speak and carried him to the sink, washed the cut, kissed his forehead. "You're okay, baby. I've got you." Who had me now? I turned my head and buried it into my elbow, muffling the sob that rose without permission. It wasn't one of those weepy movie cries. It was ugly, raw, the kind you feel in your ribs, the kind you swallow because there's no one left to hold you. I wasn't crying over the garage or even over Alan. I was crying because I finally accepted it. They didn't want me anymore. I was a burden now, an afterthought, something they didn't know what to do with. Do you know what that feels like? To watch your own family rearrange life without you. To realize you were never really part of the foundation, but just another picture on the wall they could quietly take down. I held my breath as a possum thudded somewhere behind the water heater. Even it seemed to belong here more than I did. I wanted to leave, but I had nowhere to go. Not yet. So I did what I've done all my life. I made do. I bit down on my pain and told myself it was temporary, that things would change. But in the back of my mind, a voice whispered they won't. Because real love doesn't exile you to a concrete box. Real love doesn't ask you to shrink just to keep the peace. Real love would have come down to check if the garage was warm enough. Real love would have knocked and said, "I'm sorry," even once. Instead, I stared at the ceiling until the stars faded and morning crept in under the door. And I realized I wasn't broken yet. Hurt, yes. Shaken completely. But broken, not yet. If you were me, would you have left then and there? Or would you wait just one more day, hoping someone inside would realize what they lost by sunrise? My bones ached in a way I hadn't felt before, not from age, not from arthritis, from something deeper, a kind of soul bruising, the kind you don't ice or wrap with bandages, the kind that seeps into your breath, your voice, your very posture. I sat up slowly on the cot, still wearing the same clothes from the day before. I ran my hands over my face, dry and swollen, and stared at the rows of boxes stacked neatly in the corner of the garage. Mom's keepsakes, Jeremy, school years, Christmas, living room. Alan, tools. They were all labeled in my handwriting. Once upon a time, I packed those boxes with care. I thought they would be moved to a bigger home someday. Maybe a lake house. Maybe a retirement dream. I never imagined they'd be my only witnesses to heartbreak. I stood, pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders, and walked over to the boxes. The tape was brittle, like time had dried out, even the glue that once held things together. I opened one. Inside a stack of photo albums. One of them had the picture from Jeremy's 5th birthday. His frosting-smeared face as he clutched the blue bike we surprised him with. Alan had taken that photo. He called it the joy shot. I stared at it for a long time, not because I missed the memory, but because I barely recognized myself in it. I was smiling so wide, hair curled, cheeks flushed, the kind of woman who still believed in the future. Still believed that if she gave enough, loved hard enough, stayed silent at the right moments, she would never be left behind. I flipped the page, a beach photo from Florida. Alan with his arm around me, Jeremy building a sandcastle nearby. I remembered that day clearly, sunburn on my shoulders, too much salt in the picnic sandwiches, but laughter, so much laughter. I ran my finger along the edge of the photo. Was it all a lie? Did Alan ever love me the way I loved him, or was I just convenient, a good woman, a steady wife, the one who made sure the bills were paid and the in-laws remembered birthdays, the one who smiled through disappointment, who made peace her full-time job? I opened another box, this one filled with winter scarves and framed pictures wrapped in dish towels. I unwrapped one, Jeremy's graduation photo, the same suit he wore to his job interview 3 years later. I remembered hemming those pants while he paced the hallway practicing what he'd say. I remembered holding his hand when he didn't get the job and telling him something better was coming. Now he wouldn't even hold the door open for me. My fingers began to tremble. Not from the cold, but from the shame that rose with every item I touched. Everything I had built, everything I gave was here, stacked like old clutter. Out of sight, out of mind. Even I had been boxed up. I sat down next to the boxes and began to cry. It wasn't loud, it wasn't messy. It was the kind of cry you let happen when you're too tired to pretend you're strong. The kind where tears roll in silence and everyone feels like a goodbye. I cried for the woman who stayed in a marriage that turned into routine. I cried for the mother who ignored red flags in Morgan's tone just to stay included. I cried for the daughter who once promised her parents she'd never end up forgotten. And as I wept, I noticed something small on the concrete floor. A card, bent, the envelope yellowed, tucked beneath a box labeled Mom's desk. I picked it up, opened it gently. It was a birthday card from my own mother, dated 12 years ago. I had just turned 50. To my Lil, you give your love so fully, so freely. I just hope someone is pouring it back into you the same way. Don't forget who you are, sweetheart, even if they do. Love, Mom. I clutched the card to my chest. I had forgotten who I was. Not because they made me, but because I let myself. I became what everyone needed, quiet, helpful, available, until there was nothing left of me to miss. But reading those words, I felt something shift. I wasn't just a discarded wife, or an unwanted mother, or a woman sleeping in a garage. I was still Lillian Carter, daughter, woman, whole. I wiped my face, took a deep breath, and whispered to the cold, "You're not going to break me." If you were sitting beside me, sifting through boxes of your old life, would you keep clinging to what was, or would you finally start reaching for what could be? It happened the next morning. I was sitting on the edge of the cot, wrapping up an old scarf from one of the boxes around my shoulders when the door creaked open. I didn't hear the knock if there was one. Morgan stood in the doorway of the garage, arms folded, lips pressed thin. She didn't step in. She didn't even pretend to smile. She stood there like she was the homeowner, and I was a stranger trespassing on her property. "We need to talk," she said. I rose slowly, careful not to betray how stiff my joints felt from the cold. I stood in my own son's garage like a child being summoned to the principal's office. Morgan didn't bother with small talk. "Lillian, I know this isn't easy for you, but we've done what we can. It's not working. You can't stay here." She said it like she was discussing a broken lamp, not a living, breathing woman. "I was under the impression this was temporary," I replied, voice calm, flat. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "It was, but things are different now. The baby's due soon, and I need peace in the house. My parents are helping, it's just, we can't juggle everyone. Everyone. Like I was one of many. Like I was a piece of clutter. I didn't ask where Jeremy was. I already knew. He was inside, letting her do this, letting her be the one to say the words he was too much of a coward to speak. "You mean he can't juggle me?" I said, more to myself than to her. She didn't deny it. Instead, she stepped forward and placed a crisp envelope on top of one of the boxes. "Here's a little something to help with a motel or Airbnb for a few nights. I Venmo'd Jeremy for it. It should cover the week." My breath caught. "You're paying me to leave." "I'm helping you transition," she said, like the word could make this sound merciful. I stared at her, really stared. Not at the young woman I tried, for years to please, to bond with, to gently advise, without overstepping, but at the woman who had successfully pushed me out of my own family. Morgan always knew how to win, and she always knew how to smile while doing it. "I gave my life to this family," I whispered. Her face softened for just a second, but only a second. "Families change, Lillian. It's no one's fault. No one's fault." The ultimate gaslight. The way people excuse their cruelty by calling it inevitable. I looked down at the envelope, then back up at her. "I won't be bought." Morgan shrugged. "Then I hope you figure something out. Because you can't stay here." She turned and left, just like that. As if she had just finished a chore on her to-do list: take prenatal vitamins, answer emails, remove mother-in-law from garage. The door closed behind her. The lock clicked, and I stood there, holding a scarf that used to smell like vanilla and now smelled like dust, staring at the money that was supposed to be kindness but reeked of power. I waited, half expecting Jeremy to come down, to tell me it was a mistake, that Morgan had overstepped, that he still wanted me, that someone in that house had a spine. But no one came. No one ever came. I packed slowly, folded the few clothes I had back into the bag, tucked my mother's birthday card between the pages of my old photo album, and then I reached for one of the smaller boxes, just one. I couldn't take more. The others would have to stay, like the parts of me I had already been forced to leave behind. I took one last look around, at the shelves Alan built, the toolbox Jeremy gave him for Father's Day, the rusted bikes, the dried-up paint cans, so many pieces of a life that no longer included me. I opened the side door and stepped into the morning light. No one came to the window. No one waved. No one followed. I was free, but I was not whole. If you were me, would you have turned around? Would you have knocked one more time? Would you have asked just once more to be chosen? Or would you, like I did, step onto the sidewalk with quiet dignity, knowing the people behind that door had already decided who mattered? The wind was sharp that morning, cutting through my coat as if it knew I was no longer protected. I walked to my car slowly, every step heavier than the last. My small roller bag thumped against each crack in the pavement. I didn't look back at the house, not even once. I got into the car, closed the door, and sat still. The silence was thick. No music, no tears, just the low hum of the engine and the weight of an envelope I refused to open, still sitting in the passenger seat like it had something to say. I didn't know where to go. I typed nearby motels into my phone and stared at the blinking cursor like it might offer something better than cheap bedding and buzzing fluorescent lights. I had money, but not much. Alan had always handled the finances, and after that dinner announcement, I knew I couldn't count on anything consistent. So I drove, not toward a motel, just away. The sun was already low by the time I pulled off the interstate. I found a truck stop, a dusty place with aging pumps, and a convenience store that smelled like stale hot dogs and coffee filters. There were cars parked along the edge of the lot, some with people sleeping inside. I parked near the back, away from the lights. I told myself it would just be for one night. I reclined the seat and tried to find a comfortable angle, but the gear stick dug into my thigh, and the cold crept in, slowly, uninvited. I covered myself with my coat and the blanket from the garage, but still every part of me felt exposed. At 9:17 p.m., a semi pulled in beside me, engine roaring like thunder. I jumped, heart pounding, until I saw the driver just reaching for snacks from his side window. I exhaled slowly, shame and fear mixing in my chest like smoke. I had never been scared to sleep before, not even during storms, not even when Alan used to come home late, with excuses and wine on his breath. But this was different. This was the kind of fear that comes when you realize no one is looking for you. No one even knows or cares where you are. I stared at the ceiling of the car, watching condensation pool near the sunroof, and thought about all the nights I stayed awake, rocking Jeremy through fevers. All the birthdays I planned down to the balloon colors. All the Thanksgivings I cooked alone while Alan watched football. And now I was eating saltine crackers in a parked car. I wondered, what is the exact moment you become invisible? Is it when your husband hands you divorce papers like a receipt? Or when your son lets his wife kick you out without raising his voice? Or is it something quieter, like when your phone doesn't ring for hours and not one person notices? I watched a young woman walk into the truck stop convenience store. She wore a hoodie and sandals. She looked tired, but her expression held something I couldn't quite place. Freedom, maybe. Or maybe just the absence of shame. I wanted that. Not just freedom from the car, from the silence, but from the weight of wondering if I deserved this. I opened the glove compartment and pulled out an old gas station pen and a faded receipt. On the back of it, I wrote, "I am still someone." Just that, not for them, for me. Because in that moment, I needed to believe it. If you were me sleeping in a car at a truck stop, while the people you raised clink glasses over dinner, what would you hold on to? What truth would you write down just to remember you still exist? Because sometimes it's not the floor or the cold or the dark that hurts the most. It's knowing your name doesn't echo in the hearts it used to live in. The next morning I awoke, stiff, sore, and startled, by my own breath fogging the windshield. My body felt like it had aged 10 years overnight. I looked around the truck stop lot. Most of the other cars were gone. The semi next to me had pulled out sometime before dawn, leaving only tire tracks in the frost-covered pavement. My phone had barely 4% battery left. I held it in my hands for a while before unlocking it, unsure if I wanted to face the silence again. No calls, no texts, not even a message from Jeremy. Part of me still expected him to check in, to say, "Mom, where are you?" but nothing. I plugged the phone into the car's charger and turned it on just enough to scroll through what little reception I had. That's when I saw it. A new email. Subject: heard what happened. If you need to talk. From Julia Hightower, my sister. We hadn't spoken in almost 6 years. Our falling out wasn't dramatic, just slow like a crack crawling across glass. She moved away after Mom died. I stayed. She thought I clung too tightly to family. I thought she ran too easily from it. Our calls became holidays, then only birthdays, then nothing. But there her name was. Heard what happened. If you need to talk. There was no punctuation in the message, no judgment, just a quiet open door. I pulled into a nearby public library to use the Wi-Fi and replied with trembling fingers, "I'm okay. Not really. Can I call?" Within minutes, anytime. Here all day. I sat in the car parked outside the library, clutching the phone like it was a lifeline. My hands were shaking as I tapped her name and pressed call. She answered on the second ring. Lillian. Her voice hadn't changed. It still had that low, calm tone that always made you feel like nothing could really fall apart. "I'm here," I said. There was a pause, not awkward, just long enough for us to feel the years between us. "Tell me what happened," she said. And so I did. I told her about the garage, the door that locked behind me, the cold dinners, the silence, the envelope of cash, the truck stop, the loneliness, the divorce. And she listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't say, "I told you so." She didn't ask why I hadn't called sooner. When I finished, I expected her to tell me to be strong, to fight back, to forgive them. But all she said was, "Come here." I blinked. "I'm in Nashville now," she continued. "It's not fancy, but I've got a spare room. And I've got coffee. And I've got ears. Just come here." I hadn't cried on the phone in years. But hearing those words, I let out a breath that cracked down the middle. "You sure?" "Of course I'm sure," she said. "You've carried enough for other people. Let someone carry you for a while." That afternoon I drove, 6 hours through rain and patches of snow, through back roads and memories, through fear and shame. I stopped once for gas, once for tears, and once just to sit, and stare at the interstate signs wondering if I'd really make it. But when I pulled into her gravel driveway, she was already outside. Julia looked older, so did I, but she smiled the same. We didn't hug right away. She just walked up to the car, opened the passenger door, and grabbed my bag. "Come inside," she said, as if I had never left. Her house smelled like cinnamon and books. There was a crocheted blanket on the couch and mismatched mugs hanging by the sink. Nothing fancy, but every inch of it was warm. She made me tea, sat across from me, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could exhale. We didn't talk much that night. We didn't have to. She gave me the guest room, real pillows, a soft bed, a nightstand with a lamp. I climbed in, pulled the quilt to my chin, and stared at the ceiling. I wasn't home. But I wasn't alone. If you were me, after all that silence, all that cold, all that shutting out, would you trust this kindness? Would you let your guard down? Or would you lie awake, wondering how long before this door too quietly closes? It took a few days before I could look Julia in the eye without apologizing for being there. I kept saying I'll find a place soon or I won't be a burden, and she'd wave me off like I was offering her a plate of guilt she didn't order. "You're not a burden, Lillian," she said one morning over coffee. "You're my sister." The word sounded foreign, not because I didn't believe it, but because no one had called me anything with that much warmth in a long time. Not Mom, not Honey, not even Lillian, just someone. I was always, "Can you pick this up?" or "Can you stay out of the way?" or "We need the room." My name had become attached to inconvenience. But here in Julia's little yellow house, tucked behind rows of oak trees and wind chimes, I heard it again. Lillian, as if I still had a shape, a sound, a presence. I spent the first few days in quiet. I sat by the window with a cup of tea and stared at birds on the fence. I took long showers, longer than I'd had in weeks. I let myself sink into the bed without worrying who would knock or when I'd have to leave. Julia gave me space, but she didn't let me disappear. She'd come home from work and sit next to me with takeout boxes and gossip about her neighbors. She played old Motown records on Saturday mornings and insisted I learn the words to songs I'd long forgotten. She even pulled out an old box of photos, ones I hadn't seen in decades. There we were, side by side, in pigtails covered in mud from the backyard. There was Mom holding us at Christmas, her laugh caught forever in the blur of motion. There was the beach trip where we got sunburned and fought over a towel. I hadn't thought of those days in years. I wasn't a guest in those pictures. I wasn't an afterthought. I was someone. One evening, I found Julia in the den, sorting through crochet yarn, and I sat beside her. "I don't think I ever realized how empty I was," I said, "until I left." She looked at me with that same calm she always had. "You weren't empty. You were poured out. By people who never thought to refill you." I swallowed hard, and then slowly I began to refill myself. Julia introduced me to the community center downtown. They needed volunteers, people to organize donations, help serve meals, sort clothes. I showed up just to help. I left with something more, people who saw me. There was a woman named Patrice who handed me a warm cinnamon roll on my first day and said, "You got kind eyes. Don't let them harden." There was a man named Earl who taught me how to stack boxes without throwing out my back. They didn't know my story. I didn't tell them yet. But they laughed with me, listened when I spoke, asked for my opinion like it mattered. After a week, the director offered me a stipend to help with morning shifts. "Just till we fill the role," she said. But I smiled, because for the first time, I didn't feel like I was being offered less. I felt useful, needed, like Lillian. I started dressing again with care. Not to impress anyone, but because I missed the feeling of looking like myself. I cut my hair, bought a blouse with flowers on it, wore lipstick for the first time in years. When I passed a mirror, I didn't look away. One afternoon, while sweeping the kitchen, I found an old notepad in one of Julia's drawers. I wrote at the top, "Who am I now?" And underneath, without even thinking, I wrote, "I am not unwanted. I am not invisible. I am not disposable. I am someone." I tore the page out and folded it into my wallet, because no matter where I go from here, I want to carry that truth with me. If you were me starting over after 60, with nothing but one suitcase and a sister's kindness, what would you rebuild first? Your faith, your strength, or your name? Because sometimes that's the last thing to come back, and the most important to remember. 3 months later, I was standing behind the register at the tiny bookstore 3 blocks from Julia's house, smiling as a little girl dragged a stack of fairy tale books to the counter. Her mother apologized with tired eyes and a patient shrug, but I just laughed. "Hey, I used to buy my son a new book every Friday. Let her build the tower." The mother smiled back. "You're good with kids." I paused for a second. "I used to be someone's mom," I said, and then quickly corrected myself. "I am someone's mom." It's funny how easily we erase ourselves, how the things we lose start to feel like things we never were. But not anymore. I was working again, nothing fancy. A few shifts a week at the bookstore, a few more at the community center. They didn't pay much, but I didn't care. What they gave me was worth more. Belonging, purpose. My life was small now, yes, but it was my own. My days had rhythm. Coffee at dawn with Julia on the porch, mornings stocking shelves and alphabetizing titles. Afternoons folding donated clothes or handing out peanut butter sandwiches with Earl, who still called me Miss Sunshine no matter how grumpy I looked. Evenings were for puzzles, or old movies, or pie, from the bakery that Julia swore was just okay, but always finished anyway. Sometimes I sat in my room and ran my fingers over the edge of my mother's old birthday card, tucked neatly into the drawer beside my bed. "Don't forget who you are, sweetheart, even if they do." I hadn't forgotten, not anymore. I was Lillian Carter, not the ex-wife, not the mother-in-law, not the burden in the garage. I was a woman who survived being erased and started writing herself back in. Jeremy hadn't called, not once. Alan sent one email, short and sterile. "Hope you're doing well. Let me know where to send the papers." I read it, deleted it. No signature, no apology. Morgan sent a baby announcement through Julia. They had a girl, she said. Named her Avery. Avery, that was the name I'd picked for a daughter we never had. I didn't cry, not then. But that night I lit a candle in my room, whispered a prayer into the quiet air. May she always know her worth. May she never have to beg for love that should be given freely. Because even if I wasn't invited back into their lives, I could still send strength out like a ripple. What they didn't know was that I'd become stronger in their absence than I ever was in their presence. They thought they had pushed me aside. What they really did was set me free. Free from pretending, from waiting, from hoping people would change. I no longer needed their approval. I no longer wanted their table. I had built my own. It was smaller, but it was sturdy, and no one at this table ever made me feel unwelcome. One day, as I was locking up the bookstore, Patrice from the center walked by with her granddaughter. "Hey," she called. "We're doing karaoke next week. Come sing with us." I laughed. "Only if I get backup vocals." "Girl, we are the backup vocals," she said, and I smiled. I watched her walk off and thought they never saw this version of me coming. Not the woman broken on a garage floor. Not the woman sobbing into a steering wheel. not the woman holding a suitcase and an envelope she never spent. No, they didn't see this. But I did, and now I'm never going to let her disappear again. If you were me, would you still be waiting for them to apologize? Would you send pictures of your new life, hoping they'd care? Or would you take this quiet joy, this soft strength, and carry it with both hands into whatever comes next? Because sometimes the best revenge is not revenge at all. It's peace. The invitation came in a soft pink envelope, sealed with a gold sticker that said, "Baby shower for Morgan and baby Avery." My name was written in someone else's handwriting. It wasn't from Jeremy. It wasn't even from Morgan. It was from Diane Morgan's mother. A polite gesture, I suppose. Or maybe a power play. Maybe she wanted to prove they still held the reins. Inside there was a photo of Morgan in a pale blue dress, one hand on her bump, the other resting gently on Jeremy's chest. He looked older, tired, but not unhappy. I stared at the picture for a long time. There was no mention of me, no personal note, no apology, just a line at the bottom. "Please RSVP by the 12th. Gifts appreciated." I set the card on the kitchen counter. Julia came in while I was still staring at it. "You going?" she asked softly. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I said, "You know what? I remember making a baby blanket for Jeremy before he was even born. I stitched every letter of his name across the corner. I used yellow because I didn't know if it'd be a boy or a girl, but I knew it had to feel like sunshine." Julia sat beside me. "I wonder where that blanket is now," I added. "Probably boxed up," she said, "or maybe thrown out." I didn't go to the shower. I didn't even RSVP. Instead, I spent the day in the backyard with Julia planting tulip bulbs along the fence line. We wore sun hats and drank lemonade and let the radio play soft jazz through the open kitchen window. At one point, I laughed so hard at something, she said I had to sit down in the dirt. My hands were covered in soil. My knees were sore. But I felt more alive in that moment than I ever had holding a wrapped gift inside someone else's house, pretending I belonged. Later that night, Julia poured us both a glass of wine, and we sat on the porch. "Think they noticed you weren't there?" she asked. "I hope so," I said. "And I hope they also noticed I didn't chase an apology. The truth is, not going wasn't revenge. It was clarity. For years I showed up for people who didn't show up for me. Birthdays, holidays, graduations. I clapped, I cooked, I cleaned, I consoled. I sat in the back row so everyone else could have the spotlight. But this time I stayed home, and the world didn't fall apart. No one begged me to come. No one drove to Nashville to ask why. No one called afterward to say, "We missed you," which only proved what I already knew. I had been erased long before I ever stepped out the door. That night, I lit a candle and placed it by the window. Not for them, but for me. For the woman who finally chose peace over performance, love over longing, and roots over reaching. Because sometimes not showing up isn't weakness, it's strength. If you were me, if you received that invitation, after months of silence, would you have gone? Would you have smiled through gritted teeth, handed over a gift, and swallowed your dignity just to prove you were still willing? Or would you, like me, have spent that Sunday in a garden planting something that might actually grow time past? Quietly, honestly, without ceremony. It was the kind of time that didn't demand anything from me. The kind that let me breathe, soften, and finally settle into who I was becoming. I stopped counting the days since the garage. I stopped checking for messages that would never come. I stopped wondering if Jeremy had regrets, because if he did, he never said, and I no longer needed to hear it. But then in late spring, the phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, But something in me, it wasn't hope, not anymore, but curiosity told me to pick up. Lillian. Alan. His voice hadn't changed, still steady, still smooth. Still a man who could destroy a life without raising his tone. I was just checking in, he said. Wanted to see how you were. I didn't respond right away. I watched a blue jay land on the railing outside Julia's window and tilt its head at me. Even it seemed more sincere than this man. I'm fine, I said flatly. He cleared his throat. I've been thinking about everything, about how it all went down. I didn't handle things right. No, I said you didn't. Another pause. I miss you sometimes. You miss what I gave you, I corrected. Not me. There was silence. The first honest silence we'd ever shared. Then would you consider meeting up sometime just to talk? I looked down at the ring I still hadn't thrown away. It sat in a drawer, cold and forgotten. Alan, I said gently, I'm not angry anymore, but I'm not coming back, even just as friends. No, I interrupted, not even as friends. I didn't say it to punish him. I said it because it was finally true. He gave a half-hearted goodbye. I hung up. And just like that, I felt lighter. The next week, Jeremy texted me. No hi, Mom. No sorry. Just hope you're doing well. Morgan said you got the invite. Baby's good. Hope things are okay on your end. I stared at it. I reread it. Then I deleted it. No response. Because what do you say to a child who let you sleep in a garage? What do you say to a boy who stood beside his wife while his mother was dismissed like old furniture? Nothing. You say nothing, because silence in the right hands is not weakness. It's power. That was the day I walked past the flower shop on the corner and bought myself a bouquet. Purple tulips. The same kind I had planted with Julia during the baby shower. I didn't wait for someone to give them to me. I gave them to myself. I didn't return their calls. I didn't send thank yous or photo updates. I didn't explain, justify, or perform. I simply lived, and that living quiet, gentle, unremarkable, to anyone but me, was the most radical thing I had ever done. Because I used to think love meant staying, now I know sometimes love means leaving and never walking back through the same door. If you were me, would you still wonder what could have been? Would you hold space for people who couldn't hold it for you? Or would you let the past sit where it belongs behind you? Still and silent. It was raining the night I decided to write the letter. Not the kind of dramatic thunderstorm that pounds on the roof demanding attention. Just a soft, steady rain that whispered on the windows like it had something kind to say. I lit a candle in Julia's guest room and sat at her old writing desk. It still smelled faintly of cedar and lavender, like our mother's hands. The lamp beside me cast a gentle glow over the blank sheet of paper. My pen hovered for a moment. Then I wrote, Dear me. That's how it started. I didn't write to Alan. I didn't write to Jeremy or Morgan, or even the baby I'd never meet. I wrote to the one woman who had stood by me even when I didn't recognize her. Myself, I wrote about the girl I used to be. The one who braided her sister's hair before school. Who collected pressed flowers in books. Who dreamed of building a life full of kindness and kitchen laughter. I wrote about the young bride I became. The one who thought love meant giving everything and asking nothing. The one who ignored the red flags because she thought endurance was a virtue. I wrote about the mother who stayed up with fevers, who scraped together birthday parties from coupons, and kindness who never missed a parent-teacher meeting, even when Alan forgot. And I wrote about the woman in the garage, how her knees cracked when she stood, how she bit her tongue until it bled, how she held back her sobs so she wouldn't be heard. I wrote her name over and over, Lillian. Lillian, Lillian. As if writing it would sew the pieces of her back together, I told her you were never too much. You were never not enough. You were never wrong for loving the way you did. I forgave her for staying too long, for hoping too hard, for breaking quietly, and I thanked her for not giving up. Because when I had nothing left, no home, no husband, no son, she picked up the pieces and started walking, alone but not lost. At the bottom of the page I wrote, "From this moment on we remember who we are not, who they told us to be." I folded the letter and placed it inside the old recipe tin I brought from home, the one I never used anymore, the one that held the last bits of a life that no longer belonged to me, not because it didn't matter, but because I had finally outgrown it. I sat back in the chair and listened to the rain. It felt like a baptism, like a blessing, like the soft hand of the universe saying you did it. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't sad, but because I had finally emptied the sorrow that clung to me like old perfume. It was gone now, and in its place was something quieter. Peace. If you were me alone, reborn, still healing, what would you say to the woman who carried you through? Would you scold her for not seeing the truth sooner? Or would you wrap her in your arms and whisper, "Thank you for surviving long enough for us to begin again"? It was a Thursday afternoon when Julia and I pulled into the gravel drive. The house was small, white siding, pale green shutters, a porch swing hanging from thick chains that creaked in the breeze. It sat just outside of town, tucked behind a row of sycamores that leaned like old friends. It wasn't much, but it was mine. We stepped out of the car and stood there in silence for a moment. Julia looked at me with a smile, so proud it could have lit the porch lights. "You sure?" she asked. I nodded. I had signed the papers that morning. The modest savings I had, a few unexpected blessings from my part-time work, and Julia co-signing on the loan had made it possible. It wasn't where I thought I'd be at 62, but then again, I never thought I'd be sleeping in a garage either. Life isn't a straight line, it's a mosaic, jagged, colorful, made from pieces that broke but didn't disappear. Inside the house smelled like fresh paint and clean floors. Empty rooms echoed as I stepped through them, but I wasn't scared of the silence this time. This silence wasn't rejection. It was space. It was possibility. I set down a box in the living room, only one of a few I'd brought from Julia's. I hadn't kept much from the life before, just what mattered. The card from my mother, my letter, a few books, the purple tulip bulbs wrapped in brown paper. I placed them on the windowsill to catch the afternoon sun. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I played music, not for guests, not for anyone else, for me. Aretha Franklin's voice filled the room, low bowled alive. I opened all the windows, let the air in, let the past out. That evening I cooked my own dinner. Not reheated leftovers, not frozen meals eaten in silence. A real meal. Lemon chicken, garlic green beans, biscuits from scratch. I set the table just one place, and I lit a candle, not for romance, not for company, for myself. Because I deserved it, because I had come through the fire and found not just survival, but revival. Later that night, as I sat on the porch swing with a mug of chamomile tea, Julia joined me. "You look different," she said. "I am different." We rocked in silence, the stars above us blinking gently like soft applause. "You think they'll ever call?" she asked. I thought about it. Maybe, I said. "But I won't be waiting at the window." Julia nodded. Good, because I had a new window now, a new home. A new rhythm. I planted those tulip bulbs the next morning, right along the front path. And with every press of my fingers into the soil, I whispered something sacred. I am not what they discarded. I am not who they forgot. I am here. If you were me, finally home, after being pushed out of every room you once belonged to? Would you grieve the doors that closed? Or would you paint your own, hang a wreath, and open it only to people who knock with love? Because home isn't walls, it isn't promises. It's the place you no longer need to beg to stay in. It's the place built by your own hands, filled with your own peace. And this time, no one will lock me out. Now the mornings are quiet, but they no longer feel lonely. The light comes through my kitchen window, just right golden warm, like it's showing up just for me. The kettle whistles gently, the old wood floors creak as I pad barefoot through the living room, and there's a kind of stillness that doesn't ache the way it used to. There's comfort in knowing that no one expects me to disappear anymore, that I don't have to tiptoe around someone else's peace or swallow my voice to keep someone else calm. In this home, I speak when I want. I laugh when I feel it. I cry when I need to, and no one rushes to hush the sound. Some nights I sit on the porch swing long after the sun has dipped below the trees. The stars are brighter out here, or maybe I just see them clearer now. I think about the life I had, the woman I was, and I don't resent her anymore. She loved hard, she gave more than she had, and when she was finally left with nothing, she didn't break. She began again. You see, healing doesn't always come with fireworks or applause. Sometimes it arrives in a quiet room with soft music and your own name echoing back to you finally whole. I don't know if Jeremy will ever call, or if Alan will ever apologize. But I do know this. I am not waiting at the door anymore. I've moved forward, with a sister beside me, with dignity beneath me, and with love finally for myself. If you were me, what would you do in this situation? Would you go back, or would you sit in this light, in this peace, and say, I am home?